Hello and welcome along to Mondo Chalavet Movies. My name is John and this video is going to be my top 10 section 2 video nasties list. So the banned video nasties section 2 list comprised of 33 titles that were removed from the original 72 banned movies list, and they became section 2. They were considered by the censors to be a bit less than the section 1 releases, and I do think that some of these section 2 ones do deserve to be in the section 1 list, because I think some of them are nastier than the section 1. I don't know how they actually had their thoughts on where they wanted to put these movies. Sometimes I think the censors might have had a big dartboard and they might have just thrown darts to decide which title goes on which list, because some of these movies you think, seriously, this is on section 2 and also the same as section 1. Some of these ones could be intertwined. I mean, the list shouldn't have existed in the first place. So these are my top 10 movies in the section 2 list and the movies that I enjoy the most out of the 33. Now I want to first give an honourable mention to this title. It is In the Realm of the Senses. Now this is the Region A Criterion release, and I got this, I think this came out in 2009. Now this movie here has just come out in the UK, fully uncut. I think it was released uncut before, but to have this one out in the UK on Criterion is quite unbelievable actually, because this movie was released in 1976. So due to the censorship laws in Japan, this movie could not be edited in Japan. It had to be edited in France. So that's how it had to be made. And I do believe to this day it's probably still banned in its fully uncut form. And also I do think that it'll probably be optically censored. Now this in the UK version, weirdly enough, is fully uncut, and it is very explicit. It tells the true story of this girl called Sada Abe, I think that's her name, and she, well, I'll not go into any of the story, but it's a true story, and it's quite unbelievable actually that this really happened. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up that this movie's been released in the UK uncut, and I do know it was on the list with other movies that the customs would not allow into the country if you wanted to import it, so way back in the day. So this is, it's quite groundbreaking that when I saw this was getting released, I thought, wow, it's one of these movies that I didn't think would get released because of the content in it. So if you want to check that out, it's now available by Criterion for about £18. So coming in at number 10 is Don't Look in the Basement. Now I've just got this DVD. This DVD was £10.99, and I do know that this is the uncut version because I checked it out. I've done a lot of research on the movies that I buy. There is a Blu-ray out of this one, but I reckon that I have heard the Blu-ray is absolutely atrocious quality, even though it looks spectacular, the cover. And it has got Don't Look in the Basement Part 2 on it as well. But at this point I thought I'll get this on here, I'll take it on the chin that it's only on DVD, and it pays, it's a UK, I think it's a region free disc. And I do think that this movie was one of the ones that I thought, well, it'll not be that good, but I'll put it on the list. And when I put it on and I watched it, I've had a really good time with this movie. Yes, the quality is not excellent, but apparently it's just a little bit lesser than the Blu-ray. So I'm really hoping that somebody picks this film up and they give it a good release in the UK. Maybe 88 or Arrow, even 101 could do a good version of this movie. The movie itself is it's got a lot of twists and turns, a lot more than you would think for just a regular sort of slasher movie. In essence, although it's not really like that, it's more like a psychological thriller. It features this story about this sort of institution where there's some patients in here. So these patients suffer from various psychoses, and they believe they are something else, like it's a soldier, or they believe that they're like a lawyer. And the person who owns this institution, he thinks that it's a good idea if everybody can just act out their fantasies as part of the process of them getting better. How do you think that went? Now, that's the sort of basics of the story, but this young nurse comes into the frame, and she's going to start there. And the first day she's in there, she says, oh, well, I'll go back to my room. And she says, where's the lock on my door? And the nurse said, the head nurse says, there isn't a lock on the door because we don't believe in locking the doors here. So that should have been her saying, right, I'll take my bag and I'll just get on the next bus out of here. But of course she stays, and what do you think happens? But this movie, I think, is such a really fun time, and it was one of those ones where you go into it thinking, this will be a right load of rubbish. But it was really, really interesting, and I really hope sometime this year or sometime soon, that this would come out, be picked up by somebody and come out in a better form. I don't know if the original negatives do exist of this movie, because it really is bargain basement. It must have been shot on a very shoestring budget. So I know that it will never look pristine, but I would love to think that somebody could clean this up and do a nice little special edition of it. So that's at number 10. That's Don't Look in the Basement. So at number 9 is the comedy classic Zombie Creeping Flesh, or Night of the Zombies, or Virus. Now this is, like I said, it is such a funny film. It does rip off Dawn of the Dead massively. I've never seen a film rip off another movie so much, actually. And with it being Italian, it seemed like they just did that. It was just their thing. And it's all the better for it, actually, if I'm honest. I do think that this movie has got a load of funny stuff in it. The zombies in here are quite good, actually. And it's got that sort of, it's from 1980, so it's got that 1980 look about it, which I love in a horror film. Especially zombie films just seem to come to life, pardon the pun, in the 1980s, early 1980s or late 70s. And I highly recommend this movie, fully uncut obviously, and it has got elements of like a Mondo sort of feel to it as well, which is a bit odd to have that in there. But this movie itself is basically, if you've seen Dawn of the Dead, you've seen the Zombie Creeping Flesh, with a few little twists and turns, which are quite funny actually. I think the difference in this movie is unintentionally funny, whereas Dawn of the Dead is quite satirical and amusing at times, where it was meant to be. So this movie is highly recommended for a zombie laughathon. That's at number 9, that's Zombie Creeping Flesh. So at number 8 is another Italian, unintentionally funny horror. And it is a movie that we used to get at the video shop all the time, and it is Contamination, or Alien Contamination. It's basically kind of a rip-off of Alien. Italian cinema weren't shy about ripping movies off, that's for sure. So this film is really entertaining, I find. It was put on the list probably because of all the people's guts exploding, which I think is quite a good effect actually, but you can tell massively how they did it, with sort of air pipes and things like that. But I just like the way that these eggs have been brought back down to Earth from Mars or wherever, and the people, when they come to contact them, why ever that is a thing, they explode. So they emit this sort of noise, and the alien itself, that's the sort of mother alien, is comical. It's one of those movies where you watch it, and to be honest, when I used to watch it when I was younger, I quite didn't get the fact of how bad it was. But now these movies, sometimes you get a bit more love for them because they're that bad, and they become more enjoyable for it. It's strange when you say this movie is that bad and that much of a rip-off and that much of an awful homage to Alien. That is brilliant. I do find that these movies really do a lot for me. I just love this sort of exploitational cinema of the early 80s. They had no shame in just ripping off anything that they wanted to rip off, probably for some money, and to make a fast buck. But I just think that this movie itself is just the best thing about these movies is when you get it, especially like Video Nasties, don't go into it expecting usually a serious movie, because sometimes you might be disappointed. Go in and expect something that's a bit stupid, and I think you'll have much more fun with it. So highly recommended for its comedy value. At number 8, that's Contamination. So coming in at number 7 is probably the nastiest movie on this list. I do think this probably should have been in the Section 1 list. It is Night Train Murders. Now this movie is from 1975, and it does feature a theme tune by Demis Roussos. Yes, you heard that right. Demis Roussos did the theme tune for this. It's actually quite a good theme tune. Now I just heard last night off my good friend John Hall that apparently this is coming out again, and I'm sure that one of the special edition of this is coming out with a CD soundtrack, which I'll be getting instantly, because I do think that this movie is all the better for its soundtrack. Which is a bit strange to think that I had this pop song at the start, considering what was in the movie. This cover here, I haven't got a clue what all this is about, because this does not feature in any way, shape or form in this movie. It's basically on a train. It's like Last House on the Left on a train. So if you're seeing Last House on the Left, you'll probably know exactly which way this movie's going. Now it stars these two girls who go on this train, and these two sort of thugs get on, and they are joined strangely by this woman, and who looks sort of like well-to-do and not into all this thing at all. But she turns out that she's probably the worst one of the lot. And it features, you know, the similar Last House on the Left trope, and then you've got a lot of revenge in this movie as well. But I think this is probably much better than Last House on the Left. But it is really difficult to watch in certain scenes. I can't believe this ever got released uncut in the UK, and it's got everyone who's seen it will know exactly what I'm talking about. The scene, it's pretty brutal. But this movie itself, it looks spectacular. It's really well shot. Some of these movies are well shot. You know, you might think that they're just worth nothing cinematography-wise, but some of them can offer quite something pleasing on the eye, apart from some of the content in it. So I highly recommend anybody who hasn't seen this to get this movie. I'm pretty sure you can still get it in the UK. I don't think it's out of print, but it was the first one ever to get released on this Italian Classics collection. So highly recommended, but beware, it's a little bit rough at times. So that's number 7, that's Night Train Murders. So at number 6 is Inferno. This movie is kind of like a sequel to Suspiria in a fashion, and I do think that this movie is very pleasing on the eye. And also with this movie coming out, this release coming out with from Arrow in probably about 10 years ago, it really seriously needs, if Arrow still have the rights, for them to get a 4K out, but in a nice special edition, because I haven't done anything with this movie for a long time, maybe due to the fact I don't own it at this point. But I would love them to put it out. This is the type of movie I want to see Arrow do a 4K upgrade on. The movie itself does have this colour element that was featured in Suspiria, although Suspiria does it much better. You still have a lot of interesting colours on the screen at the same time, and also you do get a lot of really interesting photography. The underwater scene that this comes from, which is a little bit, it's not like that, but this whole underwater scene I think is quite a really good scene. It's very jarring at times, and I don't think I've ever seen one where there's a kind of room that's filled with water and there's things happening in this room. It's quite a really good scene, actually, very memorable in this movie. But I would love to see this one come out again in a really nice 4K, because obviously Dario Argento 4K seem to be the thing of the minute. So this is one that's begging for a good release. It was quite hard to get in the UK for a long time, and I don't know if, to me, I don't think it should have been banned, although there is a little bit of animal cruelty in here as well. So that's at number 6, that's Inferno. Coming in at number 5 is Dead and Buried. This is the Blue Underground 4K. And this is a funny movie, because up until I saw this movie on this version, I would have had this very low on the list. It was one of those ones where I watched way back in the day, and I didn't really think too much of it, if I'm honest. I didn't pay any mind to it. I did have it on Nanta Bay DVD. I've still got it, and it's one of those ones where you think, yeah, it was all right. So anyway, when I got this one and I saw it like in a fresh light, because the picture quality here is really good, although it's filmed down by the sea. So it's got a lot of sea mist into the picture, so it does detract from it. But I understand now why the pictures always looked a bit soft and a bit sort of not as good as you would think. But sometimes when the mist clears, you get a really lovely sharp picture on it. I don't think it would ever look any better than this. But lovely lenticular cover there, and but the movie itself, when I put it on, I thought, wow, this is much better than I thought it was. And I did think that this was a sort of really, like, a much more complete movie than I thought. And to be honest, I didn't really remember anything about the plot line. And when I saw it fully all the way through, I thought, oh, that's a really good take on this whole movie. And when you watch the movie and you know what happens at the end, it makes you think of the movie in a completely different light. It's got some nasty scenes, and I'm not going to say it hasn't, but I think it's more to do with the fact of this. The banning was probably to do with the fact of this, like, nastiness. And obviously at the start of the movie there's some quite graphic scenes. Now I think that probably this is one of the examples where somebody's watched 5 minutes of this movie and thought, right, I'm going to ban that one, because if this movie's like that all the way through, and there is some bad scenes in it, but it should never been banned, because it was quite a big budget movie, actually, from a big budget company. So that's at number 5, that's Dead and Buried. So at number 4, going from a big budget movie to probably one of the lowest budget movies on this list, is Cannibal Terror. Now you might think, what, you've got Cannibal Terror in front of Dead and Buried? And yes, I have, because I'm just going purely off the enjoyment factor of this. I have of these movies. I really enjoy Dead and Buried, don't get it as wrong. I enjoy all the movies on this list, but for some reason, I was talking to Bryn, it's Horrorhands, linked down below, about the fact on the comments when we're commenting, just to say, we both think we don't really know why we like this movie that much, but we really do. It's awful, and it's really, like, poorly done. There's nothing about it that I can say, oh, this is like stunning because of this, stunning because of that. There's just, I think because it's so awful and so bad, that it's so good. And it's yeah, it could have been banned. It's obviously banned because of the cannibal link, but this movie is not in any way, shape or form anything you would think was something you couldn't stomach, a bit like Cannibal Holocaust. I don't think there's any animal cruelty in this as well, which is a good thing. I was quite surprised when I saw 88 Films pick this movie up. It's one of those movies where you think they'll just languish in obscurity forever, but they've done a really good version on this, and it looks, well, how it can look, it looks pretty spectacular actually. So if you go into this movie with zero expectations and knowing that this movie is going to be utter trash, I think you'll have a really good time with it. It's quite enjoyable if you've got that mindset when you go into this movie. Sometimes if you go into with this mindset to think, oh, this is going to be it's a cannibal movie, so it's got to be really awful, it's got to have loads of brutality in it, it's got to be one of those, the nastiest ones. It's not at all. It's pretty laughable actually. And so if you go in with, usually I go in the mindset, I usually know about these films before I get into it. Well, this was the first time watch for me when I got it. I do think that I'm quite well aware of what I'm getting into. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you haven't got a clue about these things. But a bit like Gestapo's Last Orgy, wow. But this movie for me is one of the ones that I think, yeah, this is a comedy classic and it should be treated as such. But it's all right. It's a good watch. Although I can't really explain, like Bryn says, I can't explain why I like it, but I do. So that's at number 4. That's Cannibal Terror. So at number 3 is one of the best titles you'll see in the Video Nasties list. It is The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. This film's from 1974, and I think it was Spanish financed. This movie for me is a great zombie movie. It's one of the best ones actually, and it's one of the ones that predates, probably the gore in it predates Dawn of the Dead. So if you think about it, maybe Night of the Living Dead spawned this movie in 1974, and helped to sort of bring it along. And they took the gore in here to another level. This might have been, at that time, the goriest movie ever made in the horror trope. I can't imagine any zombie movie that was, I can't even think of any zombie movies that were made after Night of the Living Dead that were at this level. So for 1974, it was really a step above. So obviously, it was put on the list because there is quite a lot of gut munching in here and quite a lot of blood and guts. But it's a really good movie. It's not so good it's bad. It's actually a good movie that's good. And I do recommend anybody who hasn't seen it to get themselves to try and watch this movie. This release is region free by Blue Underground. Now, this was released about 10 years ago, so I do think if Blue Underground still have the rights to it, they could do an amazing 4K on this disc, because this Blu-ray looks pretty good, as usually anything that Blue Underground deal with always looks spectacular. I don't know how they do it actually, but you know that when you're going to get one from Blue Underground, you're probably going to get the best picture quality of it, and the best it's ever going to look as well on a 4K. So it's highly recommended because of that. But I do think this is going to get a 4K soon because it's begging for one. So that's at number 3. That's The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. So coming in at number 2 is an all-time horror classic. It is Lucio Fulci's The Beyond. Now this edition here from Grindhouse is absolutely amazing. It's just got everything you could want. It's got a CD soundtrack in it. It's got the Blu-ray, DVD, and it's just phenomenal. The whole thing about it is what you could want from this movie. I do think though this movie should get a 4K this year because all of his movies have come out in 4K. I don't know who owns it at the moment. I know the Grindhouse don't do 4Ks at the minute, but maybe they're going to start. So it's a good bet that this movie's going to come out in 4K. It's just begging for one. This movie does look spectacular, mind, and I do think that if it's done right with the right people. But the movie itself, it doesn't make complete sense. But I don't mind that it doesn't. I've always give Lucio Fulci the benefit of the doubt when it comes to a movie that's going to make complete sense. I think that he's done a spectacular movie in itself. The music in here is phenomenal, and just it's got one of the best sort of shots in here, I think, of when a girl gets shot in the head, and it looks really real. And you'll know it if you see it, or if you have seen it. What I'm talking about. It's one of my favourite practical effects of all time in a horror movie. I think that this movie is one of the ones that I was wanting to watch for the longest time. Never saw it on VHS. Never got anyone who had a copy of it. In fact, the first time I saw it was way back. I think it was in the early 90s when I first saw this movie on a really horrendous copy. But I did know this movie had something about it, and I was glad that I saw it. But when you see it in a pristine condition, it really shows you how much vision that Lucio Fulci has in his horror movies. So that's number 2, that's The Beyond. So that leaves number 1 in my section 2 banned horror movies, and this movie needs no introduction. It is The Evil Dead. Now I don't think this movie should have been on any list at all, but it was. I think that as people have commented in my comments about these movies, that it was Mary Whitehouse's favourite movie to talk about, even though she would never watch it. So how can she speak about this movie? This is what you find with all of these things to do with the video nasties. When you go to somebody who like effectively banned it and said, what did you think of it? Why did you ban it? They'd probably say, well, I didn't watch it, or I watched the first 5 minutes. But then again, this one's a funny one because about the first 25 minutes, nothing really happens in it. And it's in the last hour that this sort of movie comes to life. All the better for it, actually. I like that slow burn to start off with, because you don't really know exactly what's going to come on. But when you see it and it starts to pick up, it's just like relentless. It does say the ultimate experience in grueling terror. Well, that's exactly what it is. Now this movie, when you see it when you're young, this movie scared the life out of me. And I saw this maybe when I was about 14, and it did have a lasting effect on us. But I think it's because of the whole actual spectacle of this gore. I'd never seen nothing like it. It just never lets up. But looking back on it, it's Evil Dead 2, I think, is a better made film. But this movie has a lot of sentimental value to me, and it was really hard to get when it came out again. It was cut to ribbons, and it was just it was a bit of a travesty how this movie was dealt with back in the day. But probably because it was the name associated with a few movies to the whole banned video nasties. So for me, this is a good example of a movie that should have never been on this video nasties list. It's just too good a movie to have on this list. And imagine, to this day, if you couldn't see The Evil Dead, all these people now who can go out and buy it, even in Poundland you can get it, and you're not allowed to do that because somebody says you can't. So this just shines a light on the sort of stupidity of the senses sometimes when they can't see the wood for the trees, if you pardon the pun. Okay, so that's it. I'll be bringing section 3 out very soon. So thanks for watching, you take care, and I will see you on the next video. Cheers.